Hey, welcome back to another Backyard Professor Chess video. I found one of the best games of the longest living active chess grandmaster in the history of chess, Viktor Korchnoi. And he's playing Geller in this game. Korchnoi is the black, Geller is the white. This is the USSR Championship, the 27th one, played in Leningrad 1960. And this game directly has to do with the theme of bishops. And it's real interesting to see how they treated and handled their bishops. And so with that in mind, this game is simply staggering. The crazy thing is, at the time it was played, all Geller had to do was get a draw. He didn't want to lose, and if he got the draw, he won the championship. So let's see how Korchnoi handles Geller. E4, knight f6. He immediately is tempting Geller with the Alekhine defense. Geller shouldn't play aggressive or hard. He should play simple and just try to cruise to a draw. Oh, I found this in Garry Kasparov, My Great Predecessors. This is number 4, part 5, I should say. Sorry. This is a sensational series of books. If you can get those, they're somewhat pricey, but they're fantastic. Just delightful analysis of all the former world champions up to Kasparov's day. Great series. Knight d5, d4, and then he comes up to d6, and then he comes to c4, and then knight down to b6. So it's a, and then he uses the more aggressive argument in the Alekhine defense, pushing the f4 pawn as well. Brings the bishop up to f5. He opens with knight c3, controlling the center, or at least trying to. They are arguing with the center pawns, but of course f will take e5 here. Geller has the occupancy of the center with pawns, which is exactly how Korchnoi wanted to play it, because that gives him targets. Yeah, that's the idea here. e6, put a stop to the progress, keep those pawns right there where he can plink them off like ducks on the water, right? I mean, this is his theory. However, Geller is not going to just let him do that. He's going to back up his pawns with his pieces. A very appropriate strategy, yeah? Bishop e7, they're getting ready to castle. Bishop e2, he agrees, let's castle. So they both castle. Early on, they're both extremely strong chess players, so they don't want to take any chances. And then he bumps up to f6. He's going to disintegrate White's pawn center now. Here come the targets, yeah? He doesn't want him to have a mobile pawn center. There's no way. Those are too dangerous. And now bishop comes to f4, so they've got a couple of bishops out. Korchnoi brings up the knight to c6. You'll notice that the d4 pawn is not protected by the bishop at f4. Normally in this opening, that's where they place the bishop. Korchnoi noticed that Geller overshot his mark, and so he immediately starts hitting that pawn. He is putting pressure on that pawn. He's saying, oh yeah, that's a good target. Target, central. Yeah. Very tough battle coming up here pretty quick. E will take f6. You notice the beginning of the disintegration of the white pawn center, which will weaken his overall game, because he's pushed so many pawns, he needs to keep that pawn center. Otherwise, it's too loose and open of a game for him. That's the idea behind this. And now, because the bishop took the pawn, the bishop and the knight are hitting that d4 square that should have had a triple support with that bishop here, but it doesn't. And so Geller's center is weaker than it should be. And it will fall. In fact, what he does is he gets rid of that issue by pushing the d5 pawn. It's better to push the pawn at this point and have it taken or take it from somewhere else rather than the weakness being here and having all of that piled up power on that powerful d4 square in Geller's side. So it's better to push the pawn. It makes sense that he pushed that pawn now, truly. And he goes to knight a5. He did hit his central knight, puts it over on the rim for just a moment. And now the comment was, white is really quite uncomfortable at this point. Both black's bishops are hitting at the queen side, and his c4 pawn is backward, and it's really not well supported at all. It's going to become another target. And this is not boding well for white. So just a brief note. So knight e5, he tries to keep the energy, the occupancy, and the power in the center. And the bishop will take the e5, getting rid of that piece. The bishop will take e5, getting rid of that piece, still attempting to control and occupy the center. You can see the battle is raging real hard for that at this point. And now the c4 pawn falls, the weak pawn on the white queen side, and now white starts experiencing some difficulties. The bishop takes c4. Notice the white bishops are very active. Neither one of them are bad necessarily. Technically, yes, this one's bad, but this pawn isn't back here or here. It's advanced, and it's got a chance to be taken or to do some taking. So both bishops are very active. Black only has one bishop at this point, but it's extremely well posted with an exquisite diagonal and control over on this side toward the king side. So their bishops are active and strong at this point. Right? Watch what happens next. Bishop takes g7. And this took Korchnoi by surprise. He said, wow, that was not a tactical move I was expecting at all. He said, so what this did is it jolted me enough that I knew I had to begin playing very, very hard for some counterplay. He now has to, it kind of woke him up. I guess they apparently had been sort of back and forth in it for a while and were kind of lackadaisical. Although technically that's not the right term. Neither one of these guys were lackadaisical in this game. So what Korchnoi come up with, before he did that shot, the knight took this bishop. The knight was at c4. Sorry, I skipped it on the line. Yeah, the knight had taken c4, and now the bishop took the pawn. Boy, I got to play this game right. I tried to write it down because out of the book is very difficult to follow. There is a horde of notes, variations, historical anecdotes, and fun information in Kasparov's book. I would highly recommend you get that series if you can. So yeah, now this looks better. This looks right. Korchnoi, now because of this shot, he went to knight to e3, forking the rook and the queen, a really strong counter-attack. The queen came to e2, and that wasn't the right move. There's an enormous amount of variations involved in this. There's a whole lot more going on behind the scenes than I can possibly show you in this short video. I'm just simply showing you the game from a beginner's perspective and our idea of what do we do with the bishops. How do we make our bishops strong? How do we keep the opponent from making our bishops weak? That also is involved. At this point, both bishops are really active, and they're very, very energetic. When the queen came to e2, the knight took f1. Blam, took the rook. Like I say, he's trying to get counterplay. Now, the bishop takes f8. Really a dynamic, fascinating game, isn't it? And Korchnoi didn't take the bishop, he took the h-pawn over here. Knight takes h2. And finally, he didn't want his bishop to be taken, so he brought it back here to c5, centralizing the bishop, keeping an eye toward the king side if he can. And knight then bumped to g4. So they both had quite an excursion. White's knight or bishop doing some damage on the king side here, and black's knight doing some damage on the white king side. So both kings are somewhat open and loose. The trick is black has the ability to check the king first before white can start checking the king. And this is what makes this game so interesting. Now, what black is doing is he's threatening queen to h4 and then to h2 check and starting to attack the king. That's the threat white is seeing right now. So he goes ahead and takes this pawn, and he has a passed pawn with the queen backing it, and a bishop, if he can get to here, a bishop supporting it also. So this is tense. That's a powerful pawn right there. That can't just be taken. And it's open. It's ready to romp. So Korchnoi has to play ultra aggressive, right? One of the best ways to do so is to make sure all of your pieces are active in an attack, including both minor pieces, right? They're both playing both of their minor pieces very well. You can see the board is pretty much open, so it's just slash, hack, and attack from here on out. Queen certainly does come to h4. And now the pawn certainly does go to e7. Now this is tense. Of course, Korchnoi has the rook here. It's a move that is endgame insurance without question, right? Queen does go up to h2 check. King goes over to f1. Queen goes to f4 check, and the king goes to g1. Now, Korchnoi does not want to do a perpetual because he does not want the draw. Geller wants the draw. Korchnoi wants the win, right? So he's got to be careful about the repetitive drawing possibilities here. And the way he does that is he brings the rook over here to block the pawn. Of course. So now there is no chance of a threefold repetition. He avoids the draw. So Geller at this point thinks the best thing I can do is swap the queens, trade pieces down so that we're fairly even and neither one of us can win. He wants to draw, right? Korchnoi once again goes queen h2 check. king comes to f1. Notice in all this the supportive, useful role that his bishop is playing here. He has a place to put his knight. He has a place to bring his queen to come back to. It's active, even though it's not moving around doing any checking or anything. It's an anchor to the black's attack, while the white bishop is the anchor to keep the endgame insurance intact here, right? Because, let's face it, right now the pawn structure of black is much better than white's. Yeah, in an end game, black will win this game with his pawns. So he has to make sure he keeps that passed pawn as insurance. Kind of interesting how it all works out, isn't it? And he goes queen h2, and now he comes to queen h5. He does not want to keep repeating perpetual check. Queen comes to d5 check to the king, and the king comes to g7. It's too bad that Geller couldn't quite get his rook into this right now. He really needs that in order to checkmate Korchnoi, because now he realizes Korchnoi has had a couple of opportunities to do repetitive checks and have a draw. Korchnoi isn't doing that. So Geller now knows Korchnoi is going for the win, so now I'm virtually forced to. Unfortunately, he is a piece short. There's a lesson in that for us. I promise. Being a piece short, not bringing in your whole army, can cost you a championship, you guys. Realize the gravity of him not involving that rook here. A championship of your country in chess. That's pretty big. Yeah. So the queen comes to d4. He's got to keep trying to check. He was hoping Korchnoi would go back and forth. Korchnoi is having none of it. He's saying, no way. I want to win now. Now I think I can win. And now knight comes to e2. Knight comes to e2. I'm not a grandmaster. I will never ever be as good. I won't even be anywhere in the ballpark as good as these two were. But knight, why not get your rook in here? Why leave it out? Why? There is literally no reason not to get that rook up here fighting. Instead, he continues just moving with the couple of pieces he has out. And it costs him his championship. It's that serious. Really, really. I'm not over-exaggerating this. We see a beautiful illustration of this. Queen h1, check. Knight comes to g1. That's about all he's got. And now b6, targets. The bishop has played a good supportive role, but now he could chase that bishop off and get rid of that pawn. Queen came all the way to d8. He now needs to cash in that pawn real quick because he's short-handed. You know, dang it, man. This is a masterful grandmaster, man. We're not talking amateurs here. We're talking guys who have played tens of thousands of games. And he still doesn't do a simple basic. Get all your pieces in. It happens to the best of them. So it's worth us repeating it endlessly so that when we get into a game, we do the right thing. Right? I'm not criticizing, I'm just pointing out. Man, that's tough. Well, Korchnoi is not going to let him cash in. Why should he? No point in that. So, the bishop now has to come back to a3. And at this point, the difference in the bishops becomes remarkable. The difference in the strength of the bishops. This one is much more centrally located. It is also, notice how black's pieces are much better coordinated. They work better together because they're tight, they're compact, they're in this thing together. Yeah. Yep. And, in fact, Korchnoi even emphasizes that more. He's coming for the win. No question. He's going for the win. Bishop e4. Well, queen comes way back to d2. Now it's time to... You're back on your heels at this point, and then Korchnoi pushes the c5. And so Geller pushes the b4, and they need to exchange the pawns, and Korchnoi's bishop will come back into here, playing the good role to get that pawn in, and Korchnoi says, nope, don't want to. I'm going to keep pushing the pawn. Watch the coordinated, fabulous effect of all of Korchnoi's pieces in this. This is awesome. So he pushes b5 because he wanted to open up the way for that. He needs that pawn in there, so keep your contact with that pawn. And now, bishop d3 check. Whose bishop is better? Who was able to utilize their bishop at the crucial moment because they didn't have a bad bishop, and because they made their bishop more superior than their opponent's bishop? Yeah, and it's here that white resigned. And the well, the variation, if you go f2, of course, the knight's going to go check and fork the queen. So, I mean, white has nowhere to go. If he comes to here, then you go, well, no, you don't. You go this way. You go checkmate that way. So, either way, white has lost because not only of the good coordination of the pieces, but because of the pawns and the use of the bishop. So this is a wonderful illustrated game showing several items. Mainly, use every piece and keep your bishop strong. So, thanks for watching my videos. You guys have a great night's sleep tonight. I'm going to have more videos up tomorrow. I've had a fairly busy day. I've been playing through a lot of Grandmaster games. Hold on. I got something to show you. I got a new treat. Yeah, baby. Carsten Muller's complete collection of the Bobby Fischer tournament games. This is the most complete annotated collection of all of Bobby Fischer's games. 735 of them. And I'm going to make videos of every one of them. Why not? No one else in YouTube has ever done that. If I can do a video of all of the Bobby Fischer games and explain how, from a beginner's point of view, how Bobby Fischer was so strong that we can emulate him with the three pillars and with the imbalances. Silman uses Fischer a lot in the illustration, but there's been a few comments that so many of Fischer's games are not known, and they ought to be better known. He was the greatest chess player in his day. Why not analyze him more? So that could technically be my contribution to YouTube Chess. Annotate all of Bobby Fischer's tournament games, not from a grandmaster level, that's already being done. Do it from a beginning intermediate level moving forward on how coming to understand Bobby Fischer's games can help us improve our chess. That could be useful. Let me know what you think in the comments. It'll be a heck of a project, but I'm willing to try if you're willing to watch and learn. So anyway, I will see you guys in the next video.